From a leopard dragging and hoisting a warthog, to hippo bulls fighting, and then 4 male lions crossing the river in the pitch dark. This is a virtual safari you do not want to miss. So this young leopard is an absolute tank now. It's been probably about a year since I last saw him. The Nsuku male, the son of the Three Rivers female, is certainly taking on the stature of his father, the Maxim's male. We spent the course of 2 game drives with this beastly young male, as he's moving around almost as though he's trying to investigate an area, trying to decipher what has moved through here, most likely what other leopards have moved through the area. Being born in the mid of 2021, he's roughly about a 3.5-year-old leopard now and appears to be thriving. However, what's pretty interesting, and we've seen this a number of times now, is normally once a young male leopard becomes independent, they roam around somewhat nomadically around their mother's territory, basically buying time until they're big enough and strong enough to then challenge for a territory, and that's roughly at the age of about 4 to 6 years old, sometimes a little bit later. But what we've seen is the dominant males in the area have tended to tolerate or allow their sons to hang around for a little bit longer. So the Maxim's male is definitely tolerating or allowing the Nsuku male around here. Whether he then eventually pushes him out, we're not too sure, but more on that to come in the future. So after some time of following him and just really enjoying his company, we let him be, as it was the end of the afternoon. The following morning, we then joined up in a sighting where a hyena was closely pursuing the Nsuku male because he had caught and killed a warthog. Now, normally hyenas are pretty brazen in their approach to go in and steal a carcass from a leopard. They normally run in there and chase the leopard off. They're happy to accept a couple of swats and maybe a few small minor injuries, but essentially they walk away with a free meal. However, when it comes to big dominant male leopards, hyenas are a little bit more reserved in their approach because male leopards can tend to stand their ground and probably inflict a couple of serious injuries to these hyenas. So I presume that they had had a bit of a squabble over this carcass. The hyena had been put in its place, and now the Nsuku male was trying to drag the carcass away from this area and get it a little bit closer to a big tree to hoist it into. Because essentially once it's up in a tree, there's no chance of the hyena stealing it and the leopard can rest easy. Dragging a warthog carcass is no easy feat. And you can see with him now as he's dragging it, every now and then he stops, catches his breath. Because he's holding that weight in his mouth, trying to power his way through this long grass. It's exhausting. So after a while of him resting in the grass, no signs of him hoisting the carcass, he was probably absolutely exhausted, emptied his fuel tank just trying to get it there. We left him. And Kate was pretty fortunate that afternoon to then be there when he eventually dragged the carcass towards the base of a marula tree and took it up into the tree. So, what a phenomenal display of strength and coordination just to take a pretty heavy carcass up into a tree while holding it just within your mouth and holding your entire body weight just in the claws of your fingers or your toes. So what an unbelievable spectacle to watch that happen. And so as a brief little follow-on from last week, here's the full clip of the lion cubs coming out of the den. But I hope to be able to share a lot more of that with you in the near future. So now in the peak of summer, after a significant amount of rain, where all the water holes are filled to the brim, and there are ample different spots for hippos to lounge around in, these 2 hippo bulls had a different idea. And they were battling it out for dominance and essentially the rights to this prime waterhole in the southeastern part of the reserve. Often what would happen is these 2 hippo bulls immediately gauge each other, and if they reckon that they are the same size and equally matched, that can then result in a pretty fierce, ferocious battle. Hippos fighting is a pretty impressive display of dominance. However, the little paddling of their tail, that is essentially also a dominance display. They normally use that to demarcate their territory or their rights to a waterhole. But now these two paddling their tails through their excrement is also trying to just put on these displays to deter the other ones so they don't have to engage in a full-blown fight. Although it looks like a little outboard motor, it's not necessarily the most threatening display. Once they then yawn and open their mouths, you get to see those enormous tusks or teeth. And those are purely designed for self-defense, and in this case, fighting. Hippos are grazers, they only eat grass, so these teeth serve absolutely no purpose when feeding. They are purely for battle, like this.
Stop doing updates north of main road.
So just watching them thrash their heads about, locking jaws there, just really trying to deter or push the other one out, is an unbelievable display of strength and ferocity. So without there being a clear victor, with neither one of them wanting to back down or retreat, we decided to leave these hippos to settle their differences. And we bombed it across to where the 4 and several males were resting, in the hopes that they were going to get up and walk towards the sand river. So watching lions cross through a pretty high water level in the river was going to be phenomenal. So shortly after we arrived, the sun had now set. It was getting dark. These 4 lions then got up and started marching towards the sand river. So watching any lions move around is exhilarating, but following lions in the cover of darkness is invigorating. And I know we spoke about it a little bit in that video with the Plains Camp male a couple of weeks ago, but having lions moving around, walking right past the vehicle, is an out-of-this-world experience. Pat, if you wouldn't mind sitting off there. And so when these four got to the banks of the Sand River, we knew we were in for something pretty spectacular. Pitch black, in the darkness, these four male lions approached the edge of the water. Unsure of what dangers were lurking in the depths, they paused to assess their options. Now at this point, the water levels were pretty deep, so much so that we would not be able to cross through there in the vehicle. For these lions, wading into the water, banding together, sticking as a pretty closely knit unit, would be the safest way. So we sat back and watched them slowly, cautiously, and in a very calculated manner begin their journey into this water, crocodile-infested water. Yeah. Stick together, boys. And for me, just watching the four of them very slowly marching through the water side by side was unbelievable. But it was the sounds, listening to them all marching through, that really did it for me. And eventually, once they reached the northern bank, we let them disappear into the darkness. Exhilarated, thrilled with what we had just seen, and watching how these four males that are now coming into their own are ready to take on any other challenges around here. So if you enjoyed this virtual safari, like, comment and subscribe. That'll keep you in the loop with any more of these amazing wildlife stories. But for now, we're going to head back to camp. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all again next week.